All right, welcome everybody to the April 3rd edition of Legal Tech Week. This is the show where we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation. We've been off for a couple of weeks between Legal Week and travel and ABA Tech Show and other things. We haven't had a show for a couple of weeks. And a lot of our regulars aren't around today, so I've recruited a bunch of ringers here to help us through this today's discussion. It's sort of the all ALM edition because everybody on the panel today either has worked for or currently works for ALM. And those of us who have worked for ALM in the past have promised not to get the people who currently work there in any kind of trouble or get them fired or anything. So we all got to be nice in what we say about ALM, I guess.
Yeah,
Chuckle,
put that
chuckle.
in well-timed cough there, Kristen.
We'll see how that goes. And why is the chat not working? Is the chat working? There it is. Okay, good. All right. So, what we are going to do, as we usually do, is start by just going around with introductions and let's start with our guests. Kristen, why don't you kick us off? You're muted.
Thank you for having me, Bob, and hi to
Rule
everybody
number one
else
at the
here.
panel is turn your mic on.
I know it was on and then I turned it off, so
Okay.
late hygiene there. But thanks for having me. My name is Kristen Calvi. I am a ALM survivor, and and always a big fan of the show. It's a privilege to be here, but I now currently serve as the editor and publisher of Corporate Counsel Business Journal. We also publish Pinhawk newsletters that many of you might be familiar with, including Law Tech Digest. I think that's all you need from me.
That's all we need. And Kristen and I worked together at ALM together a long, long time ago on some crazy projects that they had going back in the day. They
When
certainly
money
still
was
have today.
flowing, money
When
was
money
flowing.
was flowing. And our next guest also worked on those crazy projects they had going back in the day, but is still at ALM. Steve.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Salkin. Yeah, honored to be here with you guys today. Yeah, Bob, as we talk about all the time, hired me back in 1920, whatever time it was, doing one of his crazy projects, as he mentioned. And I've off and on left for a little while, but came back. Been with ALM now 20 years consecutively, 20 plus, doing the newsletter division, including the what is now the cybersecurity newsletter, but used to be legal tech news newsletter, not legal tech news, not to be confused with Rhys's publication. So yeah, so been around for a long time and enjoy the show and pleasure to be here and talk to you guys about us. All things tech and all kinds of stuff.
All right. I think we only have AI agents attending the show today based on the chat so far. It's kind of funny. Um, that's okay. We can talk to the agents, let
We can
them
talk bad
report
about
back.
AI, not ALM then.
Yeah, we can do that. And another ALM survivor who's moved on to bigger and better things. Victor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Lee. I am assistant managing editor for the ABA Journal. I was at ALM for actually, I mean, that was at the start of my career, so I was there for about 3.5 years, and I moved to the Journal. Look, I enjoyed my time there. It was great. I think I got there right after the salad days when like all the money was flowing and everything like that, because I think they actually, like I think we were one of the ones where they scaled back the holiday party for. But otherwise it was a good experience.
Yeah. Well, we were there. It was like right when the solid days ended because the project that Kristen and Steve and I were on originally was like we like scaled up and hired like what was it like 80 people, 60 people? I mean, some crazy thing. We like had this huge hiring. We were going to like create this national news service and offices all over the country and all that. And right after we finished hiring everybody, they turned around and said, "Okay, now we can lay them all off." And that was kind of the story of that. And one more current ALM person here, Rhys.
Hey, how is everybody? I'm Rhys. I'm the editor-in-chief of Legal Tech News, and I joined LTN in 2016, which seems like a long time ago, except it's pretty short. just based off everybody's experience in the industry, although, it has been a really exciting time from 2016 to 2020.
All right. Well, happy to have everybody here today. And it occurred to me, I didn't even put on the story log talking about ABA Tech Show, where I know at least Victor and I were there, but nobody else was there. Of our normal panelists, Steve Embry was there, Nikki Black was there, and we actually even haven't had a chance to talk yet about Legal Week. Have we on this show? I don't think we did a show after Legal Week. We haven't done a show for a while. Was everybody at Legal Week? No, Victor, you weren't at Legal Week, right? But both of them were interesting. Maybe we can just chat a little bit about that and get your thoughts, because both of them were interesting. Last year, ABA Tech Show moved out of the hotel it had been in forever into the vast expanse that is the McCormick Center in Chicago, and didn't work so well last year. And okay, Richard says we did talk about Legal Week. What do I know? It didn't work so well last year. And this year, I thought they did a much better job with it. I think they made better use of the space, and they kind of figured it out a little bit better. Legal Week had the same kind of growing pains this year. I mean, this was the first year they moved into the Javits from where they had been for like almost 40 years, into the Javits. And I actually thought, I guess we did talk about it, but I actually thought it went pretty well. Overall, I don't like where the Javits is, but I thought as a location it kind of played okay. But I don't know. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I thought overall I wasn't at Legal Week, but for Tech Show, I thought overall the show went better this year than it did last year. And obviously, yeah, like it was a new venue last year. If anyone's ever been to Chicago, the McCormick Center is like massive. They have these gigantic spaces and actually this year we were there with C2E2, which was like, which pretty much dwarfed our attendance. But yeah, the McCormick's place is massive. It's this gigantic space. And last year we definitely kind of felt it. I thought this year I thought they made better use of the space and whatnot. I thought it wasn't as obvious that it was just so cavernous. And plus, I think there were more people that were there this year, although I've heard that it was a lot more vendors and whatnot. But ultimately, I did think they made better use of the space this year. It didn't feel as cavernous and as kind of desolate as it did last year.
Yeah. Nobody. I guess we did talk about the chat here. The peanut gallery is telling us we did talk about Legal Week, but I don't know, Kristen,
I didn't get to
Steve.
talk about Legal Week.
I know. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it.
And when I was at ALM,
regulars and
well, Legal Week was my client when I first went to ALM. Janet Fellman was still there. For
oh,
Pete's
geez,
sake.
that goes way back.
So we were still handing them a bag of cash for the union guys. Steve knows it was real. But I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was what they had always hoped for. I don't know who they are.
It's just
sure,
like
Well, who the they is changed
even
over
us.
the years.
Yeah.
it changes, but then the spirit of it doesn't, I think.
Yeah.
But when I talked to exhibitors and sponsors going into the change when it was announced, I said I really think it's for the investors, and I think it played out that way really well. That investors in ALM and also in the sponsors, the exhibitor pool, were happier to be in a place where they looked better. I mean, it was the catwalk for them all. They got to really show, and they didn't have to make excuses about the Hilton and the freaking tripping over the wires and the escalators not working and 25 minutes to get up to a suite. So I thought it was fantastic. So Rhys,
Well,
Steve,
instead it was
pass
25 minutes to
along.
walk to a suite at some other hotel, but that's a different story.
Yeah, but that's a self-inflicted wound there. Like, bye, Booth, man.
Yeah, a booth. But we did talk about this before, because I remember talking about those meeting spaces that they had up on, what was that, the third floor or something? I don't know if anybody went up to those, where they had like just curtains between the vendors' meeting spaces, and there was like no privacy whatsoever, and it was very bizarre.
Well, I don't know if you talked about the Concilio had quite the setup.
No,
Uh,
what was that? Did I see that? What was that? Oh
they
yeah, you had to go way in the back there.
way around the corner in the
Yeah,
back, but
yeah,
this may be the wrong word, but it felt almost like a co-op. They had taken a large space and shared it.
yeah. That's right too.
Yeah, I
So,
think people will adapt to the new situation, and yeah, I think on the top floor, some people were not thrilled with how their individual spaces were, but I think that's something they can work on. As you know, like you said, Bob, growing pains is the first year there. I think there's a lot of things that they can take away to improve on.
well, I've seen the floor plan for next year, and it's it's I think they're taking a lot of feedback into account, um, in terms of being able to, because for example, I was interviewing somebody and we had to move because people needed to eat. So I think there will be a few more soft landing places for the rest of us.
I was in line at the Starbucks at ABA, I'm jumping around to ABA Tech, back to ABA Tech Show with the fact that Comic-Con was going on there at the same time, and I was standing in line at Starbucks, and there was a woman behind me talking about the fact that she said, "I'm a lawyer. I'm here for Comic-Con." And I freaked out when I walked into Comic-Con and I saw this big sign advertising my practice management platform, and I couldn't figure out why they were here. It took her a little bit to figure out why the two conferences were going on at the same time. But I think like costumes should become
I was gonna say it would have been better if she was
cosplay or
dressed as
something.
Wonder Woman and you turned around and it was Wonder Woman telling you about how she looked at her.
Yeah, I
Yeah, but
mean,
then
we should just have.
everyone just dresses like as like a Terminator for like AI or something, or like some
Isn't that Ilticon though?
That's
Wasn't
Il
that Ilticon?
that is Ilticon,
Oh yeah, it's
right?
Elder
Okay.
Khan's whole
I mean,
thing.
I say that with all respect, like,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Well, and then, like I think
Smirking
we
with
can
all
do
respect.
costumes for
Yeah.
everything. Like, costumes for all the conferences.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's definitely much more. I mean, like obviously you can't compare CTV2 with legal tech or with tech show, but like, yeah, I mean, the energy was phenomenal. I mean, it was pretty hard to like not get sucked up into that because just like you saw like all the people dressed up and like I didn't realize. I mean, because I've been to like different types of shows, but not C2. I didn't go to C2. I just saw it, but like I didn't realize that it was such a cosplaying thing. Like I just thought, oh, it's just collectibles and like like you meet people, you meet celebrities, and you buy stuff. I didn't realize the cosplay angle was such a big deal. So then when I started seeing people dressed as like Avengers and like Star Trek characters and Star Wars characters, I was like, oh wow.
Probably
So
a good thing I didn't go to ABA Tech Show because I would have been very tempted to go to the other one instead.
yeah,
Well,
and
well,
you
there were
probably would
some
have had
people,
more
there
fun.
were some kids that were like, because I think it's like their parents brought them to tech show, and then they were going to go to C2 afterward, and they were dressed up and everything like that, and you could just tell that they were like, come on, can we just get out of here, please, and just go.
No kids dressed up as wannabe lawyers, like with suits and briefcases carrying around. Like this is what I
Like
want to be when
Daredevil,
I
right?
grow
Or
up.
She-Hulk. Yeah, come on, they're
Hey,
they're,
there
they're
you
lawyers they
go.
could
All
have they
right,
could have dressed
there you
as.
go. Matt Murdock, he's a lawyer.
So the weird thing next year, I think we mentioned this before also probably, but is that I think it's now been confirmed is that uh, next year Tech Show and Legal Week will overlap by a day.
Yeah.
So Legal Week I think ends on March 3rd and Tech Show starts on March 3rd. So I think for attendees that doesn't really matter for the most part because very different groups attend those two shows in terms of lawyers and types of practices. But for some of the vendors, some of the smaller vendors in particular that might just have one booth or don't have, there's going to have to be some decisions they're going to have to make about where they go and where they deploy their resources. I don't know why these conference people can't get it together to coordinate a little bit more.
Yeah, it's always a
So many
challenge. Like
conferences.
we've always tried to go to the ABA Tech Show, and I probably haven't been to the ABA Tech Show since 2018, just due to it being so close to Legal Week. And it's just like, like they really need to like spread stuff out. It's just, like everybody tries to like hark on the same time, and it just really, tends to like harm all the conferences. And if they were able to like spread it out a tad, it'd be so helpful to all of us.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, if I can interject this, I've been threatening to write this piece for like 2 years now around which conference you go to sharpen what skills. Because in our readership, that's real. They and also I do talk to people at conferences about understanding when you're an attendee or an exhibitor, the difference between a commercial operation and a membership operation. And if you're an exhibitor and you're exhibiting at a membership conference or annual meeting, members eat first. You know, they are the priority, and that's a real discussion to have. So, you know, if anybody wants to do a collective piece on all the major conferences, we could do that. But it is hard to choose between them when they all tend to use the same marketing speak.
Yeah, there's very differences. There's great difference. That would actually be a very helpful thing to do. I mean, happy to contribute to something like that if you want to try and coordinate, or somebody wants to try and coordinate. I'm sure we all have thoughts on what's best for who and all of that. But I think it does get pretty vague. And then of course there's 9 million different new conferences coming up every day, and user conferences and everything else.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
like, like it's just exploded actually since 2020, and it's really hard to keep on top of. And it's just completely overwhelming at times.
But you guys that go to a lot of the vendor shows that I don't go to the specific, so is that of value as opposed to the bigger shows?
Depends on the vendor, to be honest. There's some ones that do a really, in-depth conference and discuss huge updates to their own platform too, and their tools are so widely, known that it's helpful to go to those conferences. And there are those tinier conferences that are trying to get up to that stage. It's kind of like if you don't have a conference, you really aren't anybody in a sense. And so people just start having all these conferences to appear to be, somebody huge in the industry. It's kind of like you fake it until you make it, I guess. And for us, it really comes down to the vendor. Although I will say that everybody wants, all of us at the events they hold, like everybody does, because it helps them to spread the news around their events and stuff.
yeah, I'll say one thing I'll say about that is that what I really like about the vendor, I agree with what Rhys said, which is that some are better than others. Uh, you could argue that CleoCon is a vendor conference, but I mean it's much more than a vendor conference. And uh, Net Documents is a really good conference. Been to some others that are really good. But what I really like about some of those that are really sort of customer conferences is that it gives me a chance to talk to customers in a very, in a way that I don't often get. I mean, we all talk to the marketing and the PR people for these legal tech companies, and and if you do try and speak to a customer, often you're getting connected through the legal tech company to somebody who, of course, is going to say wonderful things about them. So it's fascinating to be able to go to some of these conferences and sit down at lunch, and you happen to be sitting around with a bunch of lawyers who use this product, and they're usually willing to be pretty frank about it. And I think I've even kind of written sometimes about the disconnect, like um, one what was the what am I trying? Was it Aderant, maybe the Aderant conference? I think, not to cast aspersions at Aderant. I love Aderant; it's a great company. But they at their conference, the people on stage are talking about the cloud and AI and all of that. And then you sit down and talk to the customers in the audience, and they're like, "Well, we're not going to the cloud. We're in no hurry to go to the cloud. We're not using AI. We're in no hurry to use AI." And so you get a really different, you get a real contrast to what the company is pushing versus where the customers still are. And I understand why the company is pushing what's next rather than where they are, but it just gives you a whole different perspective. Um, all right. I was going to pull out actually a story I did this week because I'm dying to hear what people think about this, which is this whole what's becoming a trend now, I guess, of legal tech companies sponsoring sports teams or sporting events. The news this week was that 8 a.m. Announced a partnership with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that will make it the official professional services partner of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And out of that, they get this nice 10,000 square foot air conditioned club room space where they can wine and dine people during games. And of course, this is not the first such sponsorship. I think Clio kicked it off when they announced their deal to become the official away jersey for the Vancouver Canucks. And then Filevine followed that up with a deal to become the official helmet partner for the Utah Mammoth. And more recently, Harvey announced its partnership with the U.S. Open tennis tournament to be the official legal assistant of the U.S. Open. And as somebody on LinkedIn posted, I think their comment on this was, "Tell me you raised more money than you need without telling me you raised more money than you need." You know, I think the big question here is, why are these companies doing this? Like for 8 a.m., a lot of people were asking me, like, why Tampa? Like, you know, aren't they Austin based and they have an office in San Diego? Why are they going after Tampa? But you know, I think it's pretty obvious. I don't know. I'm not a marketer, but I think this is not about so much about their rank and file users as it is about having, well, at least in the 8 a.m. deal, it's about having a really cool place to bring sales prospects or others that they're courting and be able to wine and dine them. Things like the helmet in jersey sponsorships, I don't know. That one, I don't fully understand. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to go say, "Oh man, I just saw the Clio logo on a jersey and I'm going to stop everything I'm doing in the middle of this hockey game and go sign up for Clio." But I don't know. Maybe they would. But I don't know. Does anybody see any value in this, or what do people think of this?
Well, this is why Nikki's not here today, because she's in Tampa right now, announcing the yeah, I mean, what have they said about like billionaires, right? All billionaires like want to own sports teams, or they want to own some kind of stake in, like, I don't, maybe not own a sports team, but have some kind of involvement in it. So yeah, I mean, it does kind of show that yeah, these companies have a lot of money, and it is a way to advertise. And I mean, it's more so, you see it more so in Europe with the soccer shirts where they have the actual sponsors, and instead of, and actually the sponsor's name is more conspicuous than the actual team name. So I mean, American sports, like, it's not, North American sports is, I guess, it's not as big a deal. But I mean, yeah, I mean, having a nice little club area in Tampa, like, I'm sure that's, yeah, especially I'm sure going to a game in Tampa, like having a nice air conditioned suite is probably a pretty nice thing to begin with. Um, but but yeah, I can imagine that'd be a very nice way for them to, yeah, like, show off, generate business, wine and dine clients and whatnot, and whatnot. But yeah, but it is kind of strange to see, yeah, this glut of sponsorship deals, and it does kind of show, like, yeah, like these companies have kind of gone mainstream in a lot of ways.
Like, and what's actually kind of strange on Tampa. I don't understand the Tampa thing. Like, I understand Clio advertising in Canada because it's like a large tech, company in the country. And Filevine, if I recall, they're based in like SLC, so like it's their hometown. And I understand, like, trying to do stuff for your hometown, home area, except Tampa is just totally out there.
Hmm.
Like I don't understand, like, why Tampa?
Yeah.
Like,
In
who goes to
Filevine's case,
Tampa
one of
from
their
like June
investors
to
owns that
August?
team, I think. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense then. It just, it just seemed kind of arbitrary for me, and I probably should bite my tongue because this is going to get back to one of our panelists, and she's going to be like, "I'll tell you why Tampa." Except, it just like seems kind of strange and like arbitrary, I guess, on
Yeah.
first glance. the like like hometown stuff seems to be pretty straightforward, I would say. Except Tampa was a huge surprise. I don't know who's going to Tampa and they're like, oh yeah, I should get stuff from like 8 a.m.
Yeah, I don't know. There are a lot of lawyers in Florida and in southern Florida, and so that may be part of it. But
That could be part of it. I mean, I just don't like Tampa, I guess. I think I'm just not a huge fan of Tampa.
Well, I mean,
Kristen,
I
is
Had a
think
terrible
CCPJ
experience
going
in
to
Dallas
be
Tampa.
probably.
sponsoring a sports team anytime soon?
Hmm?
Well, Dallas is probably hard for them to get into, right? I mean, with that stadium. I mean, I would imagine Dallas stadium was probably market. It's probably like all the suites are probably like like sold and whatnot. And they probably all have sponsors. And I don't know about Houston, but yeah, maybe Tampa was just the closest like major market to them. I don't know.
Yeah. It's just like seems like it's like showing off. I have this cash. I am here. I'm established.
That's what it feels like.
And it can be helpful. I don't know. Like, I don't really understand why companies spend the advertising dollars they do. Although we'll have to talk to like people in the industry, I guess.
I
Yeah.
mean, maybe they were spending a ton of money bringing people to games anyway, and they figured if we do a formal sponsorship and get our own box, maybe cheaper in the end. Plus, they get all the
Yeah.
name branding on their stuff, and who knows? Like it could have just been a cost. We're bringing all these. It's a great place to bring clients on any given night, especially football is just they play almost every night of the week at this point. So you could pick a Thursday night game to bring people to. It's a special thing, or a Monday night game or something, and it's a big deal. So who knows?
Kristen, how about you? Is your publication going to be sponsoring a sports team anytime soon?
We are not yet. Maybe pickleball. Maybe that'll be our speed. We'll see. But I think, I think you guys are all overthinking this, whatever the meaning of wherever they are. I mean, Filevine makes sense. I think all of their employees are in Salt Lake or like official employees. But I mean, people ask these questions about conferences about why some groups choose to exhibit there or why they go really big. And I mean, to me, it's always been proof of life. Sports teams is just confidence flat out.
Yeah.
So even though and goodness knows what they paid for it, for Pete's sake. If it was $1. Um, but
It's got to
but
be
that
more than
that
a
that's my
dollar.
sort of cynical view is so like it seemed like a good idea at the time. There's probably not a lot of science behind picking the venue. Sometimes sponsorship meet is just simply the signal this team matters to you, so they matter to us. I would say in Utah. And on the corporate side, from the gift side, most of our readers can't take those gifts anyway. So
Yep.
I don't know who they're bringing to the suites.
Hopefully journalists.
Maybe.
Hopefully the legal tech journalist community is
I'd go
going
to
to be,
Tampa. I don't have anything against Tampa. I
I
would
like
go.
Tampa. I'd
You
go.
know, I'm just holding off until like Harvey does something at like I'm trying to come up with a really huge stadium. As a longtime sports fan, no, I don't really understand sports. Does anybody like know like a giant, really expensive
Well, Victor said Dallas,
stadium,
which
I
I
That
guess?
LA, that or the
LA,
LA
yeah,
stadium, the one they just built for the Rams, I think it was
yeah,
like
yep,
it's like 1 billion, I think, and also like that SoFi Stadium in I guess not in San Fran, it's Santa Clara, I guess.
right.
Yeah, I mean those are probably the big other than Jerry
Vegas one,
World.
maybe two. The Vegas
Yeah,
one is fairly huge.
yeah. Other than Jerry World in Dallas, I would say those are probably the biggest ones.
Many, 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 many years ago, before I was a legal tech person, when I was just writing, when I was a simple publication editor, Thomson Reuters used to have these events every year for editors of legal publications. And they would invite all the editors of all the legal publications, usually to Egan. But one year they had everybody come to the US Open golf tournament. And they had a big tent there, and it was quite the event. But those days are past. These days, TR doesn't even talk to reporters, so we're lucky if we get Oh, there's a couple. I'll take that back. There's a couple of people there who do. That's not fair because they do. All right. Well, a couple other stories to talk about this week. Rhys, I was actually I wrote about it also, but you picked the story about the survey of judges, which I thought was kind of interesting because it's the kind of the first survey of judges' use of AI. I think it's the first comprehensive one that I've seen.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, sure. So the survey is from Northwestern, I think. And it's a
Yeah.
survey of about 112 federal judges. And it actually showed, pretty interesting, changes. Like I always assumed that the judiciary would be resistant to tech, although like the survey found that like I believe it was like 20% of the respondents said they turned to an AI tool monthly. And around like 15 to 20% said they turned to a tool weekly. And the tool that people are turning to is really just like TR's co-counsel, TR's Westlaw, and Chat GPT-2. And they are, like trying to turn to these tools to help them like summarize docs and do like research too. And around like half of the respondents too, like essentially allow their law clerks to have access to these tools as well. So like it was kind of a surprise because I always assumed that the uptake would be quite slow. The survey found that while there hasn't been a ton of like formal training, there's a ton of folks in the judiciary who have these tools at home, so they are like going on like a chat GPT at home, and then they go into the office and they're like, oh, I can do X, Y, Z on a chat GPT or co-counsel. The lack of actual training, though, was a tad concerning. And I'm actually interested to see how it changes if we saw a increase in training on this tech in the judiciary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised that the Chat GPT response was so high. I mean, again, I guess I shouldn't be, right? Because every show we go to, every one of these like studies that comes out, they all say that like, that most I mean, that's always either the highest usage one or one of the highest usage tools. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised that judges are using it too.
Yeah, I'm like strange at too. Almost 5% of those who responded to the survey said they turned to Grok. And I'm like, what are they turning to Grok for? Like, why would a judge ever turn to
I think we know
Grok?
which
Like,
judges are
that
using
was a
that
bit scary.
one. I think we know which judges are using that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the judges who was involved in creating the survey is Judge Rodriguez out of Texas, the
Yeah.
federal judge out of Western District of Texas.
Yeah.
And he's he's gone on the record for the fact that he uses AI tools in a number of different ways, and including in kind of, I guess you call it drafting opinions, at least pulling together the facts and that sort of thing. And it's not, it's not deciding cases for him, but he's a real advocate of it. So yeah, I just thought the survey was interesting because it just really, it's the first time I've really seen any kind of a more sort of scientific look at what's happening with judges, just federal judges, and it wasn't, I don't know, was it 100, whatever he said, 137 or something like that, judges who responded,
Yeah.
but Still a high, overall
112, I
higher,
believe.
higher than 12, okay. But overall, a pretty high percentage of them said that, they're at least using it occasionally, if not all the time. So I was a little surprised by that. Took them, I mean, they just started using email a few years ago. Federal judiciary used to like not let judges use email or something crazy like that, isn't it?
Oh, it's interesting too. Like, they had access to like, TR's, tools, I guess. And all the tools have been completely updated too with all these like new NAI offerings, like, code counsel and all that. So like it's hard for them to kind of, not have exposure to this anyway. It's everywhere. And it's hard for them to kind of like just pretend they don't have access to it. It's in everything right now. Like I, like do a search on the internet and it just brings me up an AI result too. So like, like it's
Hmm.
everywhere and it shouldn't be a huge surprise, I guess, that they have access to it too, because it's kind of hard to hide from.
Yeah,
It's in every like tech tool, it's in every, search engine, and they are just like us. They, are interested and they're going on Chat GPT all the time as well.
yeah,
And that's why I'm like, okay, like we need to actually train folks on this.
yeah,
Except I believe only like half said that they actually have access to training through their courts. And there was a huge chunk that said that if they had access, they actually, went to go get trained. So there seems to be a desire to have it, except I don't think it's really quite easy for, the judiciary uh, to implement these types of trainings. They're quite complex. They can be quite expensive too. And like for some folks, it's probably going to take a ton of time because like I don't think that people who sit on the bench are the most tech savvy sometimes. So it requires quite a ton of time um, um, and education.
right. Yeah. There's a company, watch for my Law Next podcast next week, not this one, but my Law Next one. I did an interview. I got an interview coming out probably on Tuesday. We'll get it posted with Shlomo Clapper, who is the CEO and founder of this company called Learned Hand. And they have developed an AI platform for judges, um, basically to enable them to pull together all their facts and documents and draft findings of fact and draft opinions. And it's specifically just focused on the judiciary. They've got pilots in place with 10 court systems around the country. They just last week announced a pilot, or maybe 2 weeks ago now, launched a pilot with the LA Superior Court System, which is the largest trial court system in the country. And they're going to be having judges using their AI platform. I think only a limited, a finite number of judges. I forget what the number is, but and they provide training and they provide guidance and all of that, and they're really trying to establish a foothold as the kind of the AI platform for the judiciary. So, but he does talk about, he talks about the opportunities, but he also talks about the challenges that they as a company face in getting judges to adopt this kind of platform.
They also have a like new educational group too called the Judicial AI
Yeah,
Consortium. And
with
I
Judge
will
Flagel and others. Yeah,
place the article in the chat.
yeah,
Yeah, that seems to be like helpful to just trying to like get people the training and the education that they hope to have, and to answer all the questions too
yeah,
that they potentially have on this tech.
yeah. All right, so Steve, you've got a story this week that kind of goes not about AI adoption so much as about AI disadoption or unadoption or
Yeah,
something
I
like
picked up a
that.
story. It's not one I wrote or any of my regular contributors wrote, but I picked up a story that was on the Daily Business Review that I put in the April issue of the cybersecurity newsletter, and is written by Peter Winders, who's general counsel at Carlton Fields, and he's talking about or I changed the headline because I like mine better, but it's why one law firm is bucking the tide and prohibiting Gen AI for research and writing. And its general idea is that um, you have AI and you prompt it to do all this research and writing, but you have to go through it and you have to check it. So are you really saving that much time? And I think one of the point that struck me as interesting in that was that he said that clients hire lawyers because they have a problem that needs to be fixed. They don't hire lawyers to write a brief. They don't hire lawyers to answer depositions. They don't hire lawyers to get an answer. They hire lawyers to come up with a solution to their problem. And if you're asking any of the AI, pick your AI, it doesn't really matter, I suppose, just the AI and the grand Gen AI tool. It'll give you an answer, but is it really the answer that your client is looking for? And how many lawyers will just accept the answer that AI gives them and put that in their brief to the court or their answer to the client or whatever it is, and just give them an answer, but not use, what he was saying is that you're hiring an attorney to take advantage of their expertise and their knowledge and their skill and to come up with an argument. And if the answer that to the problem that they're facing is not the one they want, at least come up with a viable argument to try to make it come out the way you want. And the answers you get from AI is not that. It's an answer and it's a brief, but it's not really what they're looking for. I thought that was just kind of interesting. And talking to my son, who was a first year associate now, and he's going to be here this weekend, and he's going to tell me, he told me he's going to show me his tricks of the trade, but he literally was telling me the number of time he actually works versus what they think he works or people think he works and how much time it's actually saving him. And I'm going to show him this article and say, yeah, but is it, that's something like, I think the younger people coming in, like, yeah, it's an answer and it's good enough. But is it really? So I thought that was kind of an interesting take on
What kind of firm is your
What's
son?
interesting,
it. It's
I mean, like a
he
big
does
firm, small firm.
transactional work. Yeah.
But I mean, like a big firm, small firm.
No, it's a mid-size. He says
Oh,
I keep asking him what AI they're using, and he says they're developing their own, but of course, it's not happened yet, and he doesn't think it's going to actually happen anytime soon. I guess that's probably another topic. I think that'd be a topic for a great article too, is how many of these firms say they're working on their own, never really get anywhere with it because depending on the size or who they have in house they're trying to work on, and then they probably would have been better off just going out and paying for Harvey in the first place or whatever or use the free trial like everybody else does for a while and then try somebody else. But yeah,
just
so that's
vibe coded, baby. That's all. Just vibe
yeah,
coded.
right, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, it's so easy nowadays. Now, I do feel like, the article tends to discuss stuff that isn't transactional. Like for the transactional stuff, like, do you really have to pay such a huge, like right to like draft a contract? Like I always feel that like there is a place for like this tech, and that's really in the transactional, like realm. The problem is that like it's going outside that realm fairly quickly. And if Steve Embry were here today, he would hopefully discuss the story that he has on like, how it actually takes so much extra time to have like an AI tool due to the reality of people having to like check everything. So it just creates way more,
Yeah, that was part of
time
his point in the article too.
suck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was one of the things he brought up is that it takes so much. You're checking it anyway, so why not just do the research yourself, and then you're more familiar. And his point also, one of the other points he brings up is there's an art, well, at least there used to be, I guess, an art to actually doing the research for yourself, and then you may find a key aspect of the case that you hadn't found before, or an argument that you haven't thought of before, or an angle to take, or something like that when you actually delve into it yourself.
There's two sides to that coin, though. I mean, AI can also help you do that. I might have even mentioned this show at times, but I do, I do lobbying work, and there's some issues that I've lobbied around for a decade or more now that just keep coming up and coming up, and I kind of feel like I know everything about them, and sometimes I'll just, for fun, like go into ChatGPT or something and say, can you help me brainstorm other arguments I can make around this issue? And it's several times now come up with stuff that I just never really thought of, or approaches to something that I never thought of. So that does work both ways.
I also do feel too that there's this like trend of having like, this tech like shoved down our throats, and people are like, okay, like, quickly do this task. And like it takes so much time to really understand, how to implement this tech inside a like very, concrete workflow, and the types of stuff that like we can do well, and the types of stuff that still take time and that we have to be very careful to. And it takes a ton of time to understand the tool, and everybody just assumes it's like just chat and it will be completely instant and everything can change right there. It's just a quick like on and off.
Yeah.
And I think that the industry is slowly coming to understand it, not like it's going to take time, and it isn't the quick solution, I guess, to everything that it was kind of sold as. And that's been the perception for quite some time.
All right. So, Kristen, let's turn to you. The Corporate Counsel Business Journal just published its 11th annual 2026 Directory of Leading Legal Technology and Project Management Solutions. But around that, you had a number of contributed articles and essays around legal tech themes. And I'm wondering, are there some takeaways from that? Some high level insights or whatever else that you kind of extracted from all of that?
I like to think so. This year was a banner year for us. I think we had 15 contributions this year. For those of you who don't know the Tech Guide, we started it 11 years ago. It is not a directory, traditional way people think about directories, but we started it shortly after we took over CCBJ, and it's really a collection of articles and interviews with thought leaders throughout the industry, and some brand names that people would recognize. Probably there, and I should para this by saying, when we started publishing this, it was e-discovery every day and twice on Sunday. Like every different way you could talk about e-discovery, we did, because it was Tech Guide, and that was the dominant tech that people embraced. This year, probably the two biggest themes I saw in it, and I don't want to leave anybody behind, but orchestration. Orchestration, say it with me, everybody. Orchestration.
Orchestration.
And the idea of the legal front door. And the legal front door, I found it sort of intriguing in a way, because it seems obvious, but this idea that you have information, you collect it somehow, you structure it, and then you route it. And whatever that is, whether it's e-discovery or you're doing diligence on a deal, you're collecting and redistributing contract terms or regulatory information. And I think that with the prevalence of AI as the infrastructure, the fuel, the engine behind everything now, a lot of people are looking around, obviously, and reconsidering how they are doing the things that they've been doing for the last 10 or 20 years. But we're still in this black box, right? Because people are buying products that they don't know how they work. How is the data captured? How is it structured? And how is it routed? That actually dovetails nicely with the orchestration, because that really has come down to who's deciding within the company or the firm who has the permission to do things perform certain tasks or access to certain information, which is translated into what do the agents have? How are the agents empowered? Who's empowering the agents? And that whole conversation. So it was a lot to unpack because people want to follow the rules. And it's very difficult. It's even more difficult than ever to make sure that you are.
Yeah, it's kind of
Those themes of,
crazy.
go
Like
ahead,
I'm so
go
sorry.
ahead,
Please.
Rhys, go ahead, go ahead.
Um, the the oversight, like on the agentic AI tools is a huge open question too. And people say that, they can like stop the tool and, like have the tool like ask, like, are the steps I'm taking, like, okay, except at the same time, like, it can just extract info from almost anywhere. And, it's really, how it operates and it's like source code, and that's sometimes a black box too.
Yeah.
We've
I think
had
I
a
was going
few
to,
conversations around that, the overachiever agents along the way. Sorry, Bob.
no, that's okay. I mean, I didn't have anything brilliant to say other than it occurred to me that whole those themes of the legal front door, of orchestration, within an enterprise setting, also there's sort of a higher level to that, or a sort of related level to that of like who's in charge of tech, like who's buying the tech, who's making the decisions about the tech. I mean, a lot of companies that we think of as legal tech companies are starting to sort of push back at that notion that they are a legal tech company and want to more position themselves as, an enterprise tech company, a business tech company. I think, I think like Ironclad or some of the contract companies are sort of in that position where they're saying, are the customers that we're speaking to, or the people that we're talking to most often about purchasing decisions aren't always in the general counsel's office. They may be in procurement, or they may be, wherever else within an enterprise, tech and CTO's office, and whatever. Anyway, so it's just kind of an interesting conversation that's going on in terms of how organizations kind of view this technology, and then how does it fit with the rest of their tech stack and everything else.
I think we should do a drinking game where we take a shot every time any tech company says the the orchestration of anything, because that's the new keyword that's always out there. And it's a change, and I'm, happy that, it's a new keyword or new flash, phrase, whatever it is, although it's just become overwhelming at times, and it just started to.
How will that work? Will we just kind of like sit on Zoom with a bottle next to us and watch the news feed, or
Exactly. I think that's what the kids today expect from us. Yeah.
I wouldn't know. All right. All right. Anything else on that? So Victor, you had we still have time, right? Yeah. Sorry to be a little bit late, but Victor, you've got a story about a hiring trend.
Yeah, so I mean, this was a study that was done by let me make sure I got the name of this correct. SurePoint Technologies are based in Texas, and they found that associates showed a year-over-year increase of 106% partner as far as like the use of AI. Um, Partners increased 53%, and so just the lateral hiring with the specialty of AI increased 68%. So I mean, it just, yeah, I mean, I mean, so it kind of contrasts nicely with the story about the firm that doesn't want to use AI tools, I guess, said that they're probably the outlier as far as this is concerned. That I mean, this is just one study, but it does kind of confirm what we've been seeing just on our own, that this is a skill that law firms are increasing, and legal departments are increasingly looking for from their hires, and that people who study this or have some kind of exposure to it or understand it are gonna distinguish themselves in the market and in the job market when they leave law school. So it's an interesting study here. Okay, yeah, I'll put the link in the chat. So just go ahead, check it out, and then and whatnot. But yeah, it pretty much kind of tells us what we've been seeing.
I came across that survey too, and it was really interesting. I had a question if firms will have to have people who have the expertise in this tech. However, are they going too far in one direction? And is it kind of like an overreaction, I guess? I always have a sense that people go too far and they're like, okay, like we have to change everything. And I'm like, okay, like uh, the AI skills will be, like stuff that we have to have, although like, does everybody have to have them? And do we have to have them to the extent that people believe we have to? It's strange because like when I grew up, everybody's like, you have to be able to like code in like HTML and CSS. And that was, like, okay. And, I can still, do all that, except those skills are now totally not helpful because I can just turn to a Claude and it can code everything at the same time. So, it's just interesting to like see what skills people are, like trying to focus on and how long those skills will actually be helpful. Because like the skills that I have are now out of style, I mean, I probably shouldn't say that in public. I have awesome skills. I can do prompt engineering, but like these skills that I was like trained on in school, aren't the skills that people are interested in today. So, and like, I'm not too old or I don't feel too old, although perhaps I'm just, trying to lie to myself and come to terms with the midlife crisis, I guess. I don't know.
No, trust me, you're not too old, Rhys. But I also wrote about that survey. I just dropped a link in the chat. I won't go into it, but I didn't. I talked about a different angle, which is more its findings around AI, which was really just that, yeah, more lawyers than ever are using AI, but a lot of them are still kind of fearful and skeptical of the technology, and that's hindering their adoption to some extent. But it did say that their survey did find that 63% of mid-sized law firms had formally adopted Gen AI, most commonly Microsoft Copilot, which may explain their problem.
But is that really
81
adopting it? Because if you use the Microsoft Suite, you have it. So
Yeah,
Well, that's right.
it
That's
comes with
a
it.
good
right.
question. Yeah.
So is it, you know,
Yeah, like like it's kind of like a scam if people say, "Oh yeah, I can do Copilot." I guess it's like it's everywhere, and you don't have to really train yourself on it that much.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our hour, and a great expression of thanks to Steve and Kristen for sitting in with us today. Really appreciated it. Good to see you.
thanks for having me. It's great. It's an honor.
And to our regulars, Victor and Rhys, thanks as always. And to everybody in our audience, thanks for being here
Thank
today.
you.
And hopefully we'll be back next week. And we'll see what happens between now and then. So hope everybody has a great week. Happy Easter and Passover.
Have a great weekend, Bob.
Weekend,
Take
everyone.
care.